Imagine if I told you that your brain would rather have you suffer more pain just because the ending feels slightly better. You'd probably think I'm crazy, right? But here's the thing. Scientists prove this is exactly what happens, and once you understand why, it'll completely change how you think about your memories. Back in 1993, psychologist Daniel Kahneman ran an experiment that sounds almost like torture. He asked people to stick their hand in painfully cold water. We're talking 14 degrees Celsius, cold enough to make you want to yank your hand out immediately. But here's where it gets weird. The participants did this twice. The first time, they kept their hand in the freezing water for exactly 60 seconds, pure misery for 1 full minute. The second time, they did the same 60 seconds of agony, but then something different happened. The experimenters secretly raised the temperature by just 1 degree to 15 Celsius and made them keep their hand in for another 30 seconds. So that's 90 seconds total, with 60 seconds of intense cold and 30 seconds of slightly less intense cold. Now here's the question that'll blow your mind. When researchers asked these people which experience they'd rather repeat, which one do you think they chose? Logic says they'd pick the shorter one, right? Less time suffering equals better choice. But no, almost 70% chose the longer experience. They literally preferred more pain. This completely defies common sense. These people weren't masochists. They weren't trying to prove how tough they were. Their brains were playing a trick on them. And this trick has a name, the peak end rule. Your brain doesn't remember experiences like a video camera recording every second. Instead, it takes mental snapshots of two specific moments, the most intense part, whether that's the best or worst moment, and how the whole thing ended. Everything else, your brain basically throws it in the trash. Think about it like this. When you remember your last vacation, you don't recall every single minute of every single day. You remember that breathtaking sunset from the mountaintop and how you felt boarding the plane home. The 6-hour drive to get there? The mediocre lunch on day 3? Gone. Your brain edited those out of the highlight reel. In Kahneman's ice water experiment, both experiences had the same peak, that brutal 14-degree water, but they had different endings. The first one ended at peak misery. The second one ended with slightly less misery. And that tiny difference at the end completely rewired how people remembered the entire experience. This isn't just about cold water and lab experiments. This shapes every memory you have, every experience you've rated, and every decision you make about what to do again. Once companies figured this out, they started using it everywhere. Take Duolingo. You know those celebratory animations when you finish a lesson? The confetti, the cheering owl, the street counter going up? That's not just random fun. They're engineering a positive ending to override any frustration you felt struggling through Spanish verb conjugations. Your brain forgets the parts where you wanted to throw your phone across the room and remembers that dopamine hit at the end. TurboTax does the same thing. Nobody enjoys doing taxes. It's stressful, confusing, and you're probably paying money you don't want to pay. But TurboTax doesn't end with, "Here's how much you owe." They end with either your refund amount in big exciting numbers or a celebration that you're done. They're literally hacking your memory of tax season. Medical professionals are using this knowledge to make painful procedures more bearable. Some doctors now leave colonoscopy scopes in for a few extra minutes in a comfortable position. Sounds counterintuitive. Why prolong an uncomfortable procedure? Because patients who experience this gentler ending rate the entire procedure as less painful and are more likely to come back for necessary follow-ups. That could literally save lives. Here's what's really wild. Researchers found that people remembered small portions of their favorite dishes as fondly as eating larger portions. Your brain doesn't count the total amount of pleasure. It just remembers the peak tastiness and that last satisfying bite. So if you're trying to eat less, you can hack your own brain by savoring smaller portions of the foods you love instead of mindlessly eating more. The same principle works for exercise. Researchers found that by ending an exercise at lower intensity, people were more likely to feel positive about the experience and were more likely to look forward to future sessions. That's why good fitness instructors always include a cool-down period. They're not just helping your muscles recover, they're reprogramming your memory of the workout. But here's the dark side. Our brains remember negative peaks even more vividly than positive ones. One study participant found a website navigation menu particularly difficult, and even though most of the site worked fine, that frustrating peak moment colored her entire perception of the company. One terrible customer service call can override years of decent experiences. One painful breakup can make you forget years of happiness. This is why companies obsess over eliminating pain points. Uber realized people hated the uncertainty of waiting for rides, so they added real-time tracking. Not because watching a car inch across a map is thrilling, but because it prevents that anxious peak of wondering if your ride is ever coming. What does this mean for your life? First, you can't trust your memories as much as you think. That relationship you remember as terrible might just have had a bad ending. That job you remember fondly might just have had one amazing project and a nice farewell party. Second, you can engineer better memories. Planning a party? Make sure the last 30 minutes are incredible. Giving a presentation? Nail the closing. Going on a date? Don't let it fizzle out. End on a high note, even if that means cutting it short while things are still good. Here's something I started doing after learning about this. When I'm having a great experience, I deliberately create a mental snapshot at the end. I pause, look around, and really soak in the moment. I'm basically forcing my brain to record a positive ending. Does it work perfectly? No, but it definitely helps me remember good times more vividly. The opposite works too. In one study, participants watched scary movies. Half the group had the movie finish at the most frightening moment, while the others watched to the end. Those in the former group reported significantly higher anxiety scores. So if you're watching something stressful, don't stop at the worst part. Push through to a calmer ending, even if you're tempted to turn it off. You can even use this to trick yourself into better habits. Hate cleaning? Save the easiest, most satisfying task for last. Dreading a workout? End with your favorite exercise. Building any new habit, always finish on a win, even a tiny one. The peak end rule reveals something profound about human nature. We're not rational recording devices. We're storytelling animals. And our brains are constantly editing our experiences into narratives. The most intense moments become the plot points. The ending determines whether it's a comedy or tragedy. Understanding this doesn't mean you can control every memory or manipulate every experience. Life is messier than lab experiments. But it does mean you have more power than you realized. You can influence how you'll remember today, this month, this year. So here's my challenge to you. What experience in your life ended badly but was actually mostly good? Maybe it's time to revisit that memory and recognize your brain's editing. And what's something you're doing today? How can you make sure it ends on a high note? Because now you know the secret. Your brain is going to lie to you about what happened anyway. You might as well make it a good lie.